My name is Emily. I've been married to my husband, Jacob, for 11 years now. I've been a full-time housewife since we got married, raising our 2 boys. My husband works in construction, and many of his days consist of leaving early in the morning and coming home late. There were also times when he had to go to work, even on his days off, because he said he wouldn't make the deadline. As a result, I was mostly single-handedly responsible for raising our children. Our sons are 9 and 8 years old, both at an age where they're mischievous kids. Since they're boys, they're quite strong, and it was difficult to break up their fights. One day, when I finally got the boys to sleep and was resting, my husband came home. "You're late again today. You must be tired." As usual, I spoke to my husband and started preparing his dinner. Normally, he would come to the dining table immediately, but today he didn't. When I looked at him wondering why, he was looking guiltily at me. Seeing him like this, I had a bad feeling, but kept calm and asked him, "What's up all of a sudden?" Without lifting his head, he said to me,
"I really feel really guilty, Emily, and I'm sorry. The woman I cheated on you with is pregnant, so can we get a divorce?"
Well, it seems that my hunch was right. I had been suspicious of my husband's recent behavior and had suspected he might be cheating on me. However, I didn't expect that the woman he cheated with got pregnant. While being surprised by this, I said, "You can't just drop this on me. What about our sons? They're still in elementary school. How are we supposed to explain this to them?" I waited for his response, but he kept silent, looking down. Even though I tried to get him to talk, he remained silent and didn't move. Thinking this wasn't going anywhere, I suggested we talk the next day, as it was late, and went straight to bed. Then, the next day came. It was a holiday, and the children didn't have school. Once I confirmed that the kids went out to play, I spoke to my husband. "About what you said yesterday. By saying she's pregnant, you mean you've been cheating, right?"
"I'm really sorry. I know I did something wrong, but since she's pregnant, I guess I have to marry her. You're strong, Emily, and I'm sure you'll be fine even without me. You're a full-time housewife now, but I know you can raise our sons well even while working."
"What are you talking about? Do you think I would agree to divorce you right now? I won't allow you to divorce me and be happy on your own by remarrying your mistress." It seemed like my husband assumed I would instantly agree to the divorce, and he was surprised when I refused. I was angry that his words of apology were not reflected in his actions. What really infuriated me, though, was the situation with our sons. The truth is, my eldest son is not my biological child, but my sister-in-law's son. She divorced 5 years ago and was raising her son all on her own. But she shoved him onto us, saying that having a child would be a disadvantage when she remarries. At first, I objected, but instead of getting mad at my sister-in-law, my husband and his mother thought it was a great idea, and so we ended up taking him in and raising him. My eldest son, Cameron, was 4 at the time, old enough to remember his mother. Despite that, he was terribly upset when he found out that I was suddenly his mother. "You're not my mom. Where's my real mom? Give her back." Cameron would say horrible things to me every day. When I got angry, even though he was only 4 years old, he would leave to my in-laws' house. Since we lived separately but still lived in the same property, it only took a few seconds to get there. But he shouldn't have gone without telling me, and every time Cameron went to my in-laws, I would get scolded by my mother-in-law. And looking at all this, my eldest son seemed to be enjoying himself. Even in such circumstances, I treated both my sons equally, thinking that as time went by, he would come to like me. But that didn't happen, and it seemed that he still disliked me. Gradually, he began to take his anger out not just on me, but also on his younger brother James. "Your mom's a bad guy. She sent my mom away somewhere. Being her kid, you don't deserve to play with toys." He would say things like that and take toys away from his younger brother. Even though I bought the same toys for both of them, he always wanted his younger brother's toys and would snatch them. As for my husband, he just watched TV and never scolded Cameron. Rather, he would selfishly get angry at the kids, saying,
"You're too noisy. I can't hear the TV."
Of course, I understood that he was busy with work, but I always thought that he could at least help out a little. There's no way I could take care of two boys in this situation. That's why I insisted on taking only my younger son with me as a condition when divorcing Jacob. If we're getting divorced, I'm taking James with me. Cameron is originally your sister's child, isn't he? If I divorce you, he won't be my responsibility anymore.
Isn't that a bit much? You've lived together for 5 years and Cameron is very attached to you, Emily. Are you going to separate him from James, his little brother, whom he's very close to?
Cameron is attached to me? The boys get along well? Are you seriously saying that? I was astounded at Jacob, who seemed to have no understanding of his own family situation. How can he say that Cameron is attached to me? As for the boys, it's not always Cameron's fault, but they argue every single day. Cameron is already strong now, and I don't think I'll be able to handle once he grows up. Anyway, if we divorce, I'm taking James with me. You can take care of Cameron. Then we can cancel out the child support.
Okay.
I've reached an agreement with Jacob. All that's left is to demand the division of property from Jacob. The next day, after sending the boys off to school, I decided to consult a lawyer and a private investigator immediately. In the discussion with the lawyer, since Jacob admits to his affair, I was told that I can definitely claim the division of property. The amount of the division of property will be determined by the evidence from the detective agency. I returned home and waited for a call from the detective agency, while steadily preparing for the divorce. 2 weeks later, the detective agency contacted me that the evidence was ready, and I arranged to meet with a person in charge of my lawyer. They only had to investigate twice, but the evidence was quickly gathered. Furthermore, it seemed that there were times when Jacob, Cameron, and the mistress were all out together. Although I had agreed with Jacob that he would take Cameron, I was surprised that he was introducing his mistress to Cameron without my knowledge. As for Jacob's behavior, I had been thinking that he was coming home late because he was constantly working overtime, but it appears I was mistaken. Although I have some suspicions, I never thought he would continue his affair even after confessing it to me. Thanks to that, I was able to gather evidence, and now I can get a divorce in a way that's more advantageous to me. While looking at the evidence with my lawyer, we decided to send a certified letter to his mistress. That night, I showed Jacob the evidence from the detective agency and the certified letter prepared by the lawyer. I have solid evidence of your affair. I've also sent a certified letter to your mistress. If you agree to pay the division of property, I can grant you a divorce right now.
Really? It's been a while since we talked about divorce. I was worried about whether we could really get a divorce, but I'm relieved. The division of property? What do you mean? why did you collect evidence when I honestly told you about the affair?
Because you're the one who had an affair. You're responsible for the divorce, right? I think it's only natural to pay the division of property. It seems that Jacob thought that if he honestly reported his affair, everything would be fine. How pathetic of him. No matter how much I explain, he doesn't seem to understand at all. I thought it would be pointless to explain at this pace, so I decided to have a lawyer explain it again to him later on. A few days later, as I was doing household chores as usual, I received a call from an unknown number. I thought it might be Jacob's mistress, but it was actually my sister-in-law, Sarah. "Emily, it's been a while. I heard from Cameron and wanted to call you. You're getting divorced, aren't you? Surely Cameron will be taken by you, right?" "Sarah, long time no see." "What? Have you heard from Cameron even though I haven't told the children yet?" "I'm sorry, but Jacob and I have decided that Cameron will be taken by Jacob." "Oh, so that's why Cameron was crying. Emily, I hate to say this, but isn't that cruel? I heard from Jacob, and Cameron and James are good friends, right? And yet you're separating the two of them." I was frustrated by Sarah's selfish remarks, but I was even angrier at Jacob for lying to her. "Sarah, you are mistaken. Cameron and James are always fighting, and they're not getting along well. Anyway, if the boys already know about the divorce, I must explain it properly. I'm hanging up now." "Wait a minute." I hung up the phone without listening to what Sarah was trying to say. And then I waited for my sons to come home. A few hours later, my sons came home and I was about to explain, but Cameron spoke first. "Please, take me with you too." "You knew, didn't you? But you went out with Jacob and his mistress, right? You seemed to be enjoying yourself. Despite that, what's wrong with being with Jacob?" "I hate him. His tone of voice is scary, and my belongings and clothes all have a strange smell. I feel sick when I'm with him." Could the strange smell be the perfume? I had noticed a sweet smell on Jacob's clothes before, but I thought it was from a coworker. Now I realize it must have been his mistress's perfume. "But Cameron, you're always mean to James, and you two often fight. I can't break up the fights you have with each other forever. Besides, I thought you hated me. You want to go with someone you hate instead of Jacob?"
"Emily, I want to go with you, Mom. I regret what I've done before, and I promise I'll be good, please."
Cameron pleaded like that, crying. I was happy that he called me Mom for the first time. "Mom, please, take my brother too. We'll be good, please." After hearing this from my sons, I had no choice but to agree. I was anxious, but we had lived together for 5 years, and I had always wanted Cameron to call me Mom, so I was happy. I immediately told the lawyer that I wanted to take both of my sons. The lawyer's instructions were to discuss child support with Jacob. Then I spoke to Jacob when he returned from work. After all, I'm taking Cameron with me.
"What are you talking about now? I've introduced him to Erica, and it's a problem if you say that."
I've informed the lawyer about this. It may be too late, but Cameron wants to come with me. Cameron is 10 years old, so his wishes should be respected. Anyway, we're going to discuss the compensation as well the day after tomorrow, so please ask any questions then. Make sure you tell your mistress to come properly. Jacob was angry about Cameron, but didn't say anything in particular, and our conversation ended. The day after tomorrow. The day of the discussion came. Although we were supposed to go to the same destination, Jacob left first. He must be going to pick up his mistress. After confirming that Cameron and James had gone out to play, I headed to the office alone. When I arrived at the lawyer's office, as expected, Jacob and his mistress were already there, sitting on the sofa like a couple. Seeing the affair partner for the first time other than in pictures, I was surprised that her belly was more bigger than I had imagined. Although it's only been about a month since I heard she was pregnant, it looked like she would give birth in another 2 to 3 months. I thought Jacob must have been hiding it from me, but I decided to proceed with the conversation without worrying about it. As you can see from the content certificate, I will claim damages for this affair from both of you. Also, I will take custody of my sons, so I will also claim child support from Jacob.
What's a content certificate? What does compensation mean? Am I getting it? I came here because I heard you two were getting divorced today, right?
Jacob's mistress, Erica, seemed to have not read the content certificate. It did feel a bit strange, because she had received the content certificate, but there was no contact from her, and her attitude today did not seem like someone who thought she was going to be asked for compensation. You have to pay the damages for having an affair with Jacob. Neither Jacob nor Erica seemed to understand, but after an explanation from the lawyer, they finally seemed to grasp the situation. Both Jacob and Erica became frantic.
It's impossible. I can't pay. I'm pregnant, you know. I resigned from my company because I said I'm getting married and I don't have any savings.
That's right. Compensation and child support, there's no way we can pay that. That's it. We can offset the child support with a child that Erica is pregnant with and the 2 kids, Cameron and James.
Did Jacob not realize that he was making an outrageous statement? I didn't think that he was completely unaware about what would happen in divorce and compensation to this extent. Why would I offset child support for a child that's not mine? It's completely unrelated.
But if I have to pay both compensation and child support, I won't be able to live. My baby will be born soon and I won't have any money to prepare.
That has nothing to do with me. Anyway, please take responsibility for having an affair. The lawyer took out documents related to compensation and child support and showed them to Jacob and Erica. I had asked the lawyer to make a notarized document to ensure that it would be paid properly. Upon seeing the amount recorded on the document, the 2 were even more astonished and turned pale. It's no wonder they were shocked, since they were requested for an amount higher than what they had imagined.
I can't pay this amount. If I pay this much every month, I won't be able to live.
I knew you would say that, but if you don't agree to the compensation and child support, I won't divorce you. Erica seemed more anxious than he was. The one who would be most troubled if we don't divorce must be Erica. As if to add salt to the wound, there was someone else being called here. That person should be coming soon, I believe.
Excuse me.
Mom, why are you here?
I had, of course, explained to my mother-in-law Mary what Jacob had done. Initially, I thought she was my enemy because she told me to raise Cameron. Mary, who is not physically strong, judged that she couldn't raise a boy and asked me to take care of Cameron. She cared about Cameron and did come to help me out. I realized later that she got angry at me because she cared about him. Mary has always been strict and hates dishonesty. Jacob had always been intimidated by her and never had a rebellious phase. So I asked for her cooperation this time and had her come today.
Jacob, what have you done? It's natural to pay compensation and child support. Don't fuss. Are you aware of what you've done?
Mom, Erica's here. Stop it.
What? Erica? Stop fooling around. Don't ever come across my house again.
Both Jacob and Erica were completely intimidated by Mary's power. Erica began to cry and apologize.
I'm sorry. I'll sign to pay the compensation, so please just let me go home.
I promise to pay too.
Thanks to Mary's power, I was able to get them to promise to pay the compensation. Of course, I also got Jacob to agree to pay child support. This settled things, and on the way home, Mary and I went to pick up our sons and had our first meal out for Cameron. After that, there were payments from Jacob and Erica for compensation, but since Erica said she had no savings, her parents covered for it. I heard a rumor that the two married but continued to fight over money, and Jacob cheated again, leading to a quick divorce. In addition, Erica had to work from morning to night, leaving her baby with her parents to pay back the money she borrowed from them. Jacob, having cheated twice, lost trust within his company and was demoted to a department where those about to be laid off were sent. His salary also decreased, and he's reportedly struggling financially. As for me, I ended up adopting Cameron as a special adopted child, and I feel like I've become his mother officially, and he became my official son. Cameron has kept his promise and has become a much better older brother than before. We still live in the house we used to live in, and I occasionally go out to eat with Mary. I want to continue living happily with my sons.
Hey, have you been drinking again? This is the third time this week.
When I think about coming home to an old hag like you, it tires me out. I can't stand it unless I drink.
It's been every weekend recently, and now it's even on weekdays.
Men have social obligations, you know.
I'm working too, you know. Once in a while, you could come home early. And at least talk to our son, Kevin.
I don't care. Taking care of the kid is a wife's job.
These days, this seems to be the only conversation I have with my husband. 12 years into marriage. And I'm still dealing with my husband's wasteful spending habits every day. My name is Catherine, 36 years old. Even after getting married, I continued working. My husband is 2 years older than me. So naturally, since we are aging together after marriage, if he calls me an old hag, I can't help but think, isn't he an old geezer too? But even if I retort the same way, it would only result in a quarrel. So, I choose not to, but we always end up disagreeing on issues related to money or our child. The company we work for is quite large, and has solid maternity and paternity leave systems in place. So, returning to work after childbirth was smooth and I have no complaints about my job. My husband also works at the same company, but since our departments changed, after I returned from leave, we hardly ever meet in the office. Currently, my husband is in sales and I'm in HR. So, I understand that he has more obligations and often can't leave work on time. But still, I can't help but feel. My husband has never done the preschool drop-off and pick-up, not even once. Hey, couldn't you at least pick up our child once in a while?
That's your job, isn't it? Besides, I never wanted a child in the first place.
Our child is already born. It's pointless to say such things now.
They said that seeing the child's face after birth would make them seem cute. But that's a lie. I don't find them cute at all. They aren't even attached to me.
That's because you never play with them. You always pretend not to notice. When Kevin tries to talk to you.
I want to relax on my days off too. I can't be bothered to deal with the child.
Our only son, Kevin, entered 4th grade this year. He's at an age where he understands a lot. Our son must have noticed his father's indifference towards him. My husband used to talk to him when he was little, but his responses were always dismissive.
Dad, you know what?
What is it? I'm watching TV right now. Don't bother me.
I'm sorry.
Hey, that's no way to talk.
Shut up. I'm tired from work every day. Unlike your HR job. Sales require an incredible amount of consideration. Don't bother me on my day off.
This is how it always goes. My husband is completely hands-off when it comes to school events and parenting. He has never attended a school observation day or sports festival. It feels like we are a single-parent family. Our son has stopped initiating conversation with his father. Moreover, my husband never buys anything for our child, yet he spends recklessly on himself. So, naturally, my dissatisfaction with him just keeps growing. I don't want to nag him, but I find myself doing it anyway. There is a reason for this. When our child turned 3, I found out about my husband's debt. Since we both worked, we split living expenses in half. Therefore, I didn't know how my husband managed his salary. But after our child was born, our living expenses increased. As expected, our individual contributions increased as well. We had decided to deposit a set amount into a shared bank account for living expenses. Even though we only increased the amount by $200 compared to before our child was born, my husband often failed to deposit the money on the designated day. When I confronted him, I found out he had a debt from before our marriage. Moreover, the remaining balance was close to $30,000. When I asked what he had spent it on, how much he was paying monthly, and when he planned to pay it off, he just gave a vague smile and said it seemed like it would never end.
Well, I'm using a revolving payment system, so even if I make payments, the total amount doesn't decrease at all.
What? For a moment, I couldn't comprehend what he was saying. Essentially, he was spending more than his monthly payments. But because everything was put on revolving payments, the amount he had to pay remained the same. So for several years, the balance wasn't decreasing, it was actually increasing. I was infuriated at his lack of planning. I felt sorry for him, because it seemed he didn't even realize he was a father. To prevent further reckless spending, I had all his credit cards stopped. He grumbled a lot, but I explained fervently that we couldn't afford any more debt. Eventually, I managed to convince him not to use them. It was a debt incurred for his luxuries, not for the family. It's only natural for an adult to handle their own mess. However, because we wanted to repay it as soon as possible, we increased the monthly payment, which resulted in me covering most of the living expenses. 7 years have passed since then, and even though the payments have long since been completed, the amount of living expenses my husband contributes is still less than before. When I asked him to increase the living expenses, he refused, using the reason,
You earn more.
he insists that the one who earns more should contribute more, as if it's a matter of course in a family. His sales performance is not very good. He's always grumbling because his peers are progressing faster than him. So he's not dedicated to his job. That's why he's not getting promoted. 2 years ago, I was promoted to the head of the HR department. As a result, my salary is higher than my husband's, which he's not pleased about. I tried various ways to motivate him and even offered advice. But he didn't seem to appreciate that either.
What do you know about sales? Don't interfere unnecessarily.
With that, he wouldn't listen to anything I had to say. He would only argue, no matter what I said. Gradually, I got tired of it and stopped trying so hard to speak up. Then, one day, my husband announced he was going back to his hometown for a high school reunion. Even though he said he was going back, both of his parents had already passed away. And his elder brother and his wife lived in the family home. My husband and his brother-in-law don't get along well and have no interaction. The dispute over inheritance occurred when my father-in-law passed away 5 years ago. My brother-in-law and his wife had been taking care of my mother-in-law, who had required care for many years. My husband didn't lift a finger. Despite feeling guilty, I couldn't help out much due to my job, and since the birth of our child, I was basically managing things single-handedly. As a result, I could hardly show my face at my in-laws' house. And my mother-in-law passed away 3 years before my father-in-law. It was a year before my husband's debt came to light. So, it seems that my father-in-law left a will leaving all his property to my brother-in-law and his wife. I thought it was only fair, and I told my husband it was fine. But he wasn't satisfied with that and made an outrageous claim. Eventually, it was settled that he would receive the reserved portion of the inheritance. But my brother-in-law was upset with my husband's attitude at the time. He told my husband that he would give him the reserved portion, but wanted nothing to do with him in the future. Knowing all this, I don't have the face to meet my brother-in-law and his wife. So I haven't contacted them at all since my father-in-law passed away. My husband used the money he received at that time to pay off the remaining debt. It turned out then that while he had said he couldn't put in living expenses because he was increasing the revolving payments, more than half the balance was still remaining. The claim of increasing the amount was a downright lie. He was just using the pretense of increasing the payments to avoid contributing to the living expenses, and instead using the money for his own entertainment. It was a ridiculous situation. When I complained, asking what was going on,
In the end, it was settled, so what's the problem? All this happened because you stopped my card and decreased the money I could use. I have no choice but to take the difference from the living expenses.
he said brazenly. Because of all this, I've been cut off from my brother-in-law. So even though he said he was going home, he shouldn't be able to stay at his family home. When I asked him where he was staying, he said he had booked a business hotel in front of the station. I thought it was rather sad that he was going back to his hometown. But he couldn't even show his face at the house where he was born and raised. I didn't say anything about it and just saw him off.
Dad is not coming home today.
Yeah, that's right. While I was seeing off my husband, who was cheerfully leaving, my son called out from behind. Moreover, he seemed somewhat happy knowing that his father wasn't coming home. I once again felt that for my son, his father was not a presence he wanted around. And I realized that I felt the same way. Today is Saturday, and I'm off from work, so why don't we go somewhere? Just the two of us, and eat out tonight.
Really?
Yeah.
Yay.
I began to think more and more that I should seriously consider the future. If I felt relieved that my husband wasn't around. But after the day of that reunion, my husband's outings clearly increased. Especially on holidays, he was often out and stayed out overnight. He was strangely in a good mood and carried his cell phone, which he used to leave on the table, everywhere. It seemed he even brought it into the bathroom. No matter how you look at it, it's suspicious. Hey, haven't you been going out a lot recently? Where on earth are you going?
I've been thinking about working out a bit, So I go to the gym on my days off. Once you hit your late 30s, your physical strength starts to decline.
Oh, is that so? Do gyms have accommodation facilities?
And no, not like that, but when I drink with friends on the way home, it becomes morning. When I'm feeling good, the drinks keep flowing.
I see. Are you working out to play sports with Kevin?
Yes, that's also possible.
His eyes are darting around. Looking at him with a cold eye, thinking he could at least lie more skillfully. I was certain of my husband's infidelity in my mind. I could have hired a detective agency, but for now, I followed him on the days he went out. He got on the train and got off at the station where his parents' house was. At the station, a young woman was waiting in a car, and he happily got into the car. Since his behavior had changed since the reunion, I thought the other person was a former classmate. But the current woman looked clearly in her 20s, so it didn't seem that way. Still, I thought, he wastes money, he doesn't take care of the child, and on top of all that, an affair. I felt foolish for staying with him. I decided to break up with my husband and started preparing for it.
Well, I'm going. I might stay at a friend's house tonight.
Okay. Take care. I thought it was a perfect opportunity. But just then, it was discovered that my credit card was missing from my wallet. I remember it being in my wallet until yesterday. I hadn't taken it out, so I didn't think I'd lost it somewhere. I immediately contacted the card company and reported it lost. When asked when I last used it, I couldn't remember, it had been a while. I had kept a record of my statement on my computer, so I checked that and answered. And fortunately, it hadn't been used since then, so I was saved. I hadn't dropped it, and I hadn't even taken it out of my wallet. So why did I lose it? There's only one answer I can think of without even thinking about it. My husband had taken it from my wallet, there's no other explanation. I thought it was something he would do. For about the past 6 months, he's been receiving dunning letters from various credit card companies. Probably, his card was maxed out and he couldn't use it anymore. When my husband settled his debts, he had made a new card before I knew it. And more than one. I left it alone because I didn't feel like saying anything since my husband was going to be the one paying anyway. But to steal someone else's card, that's just plain theft. Anyway, I'm glad I noticed it early. I immediately started packing my husband's things. I know where my husband is. I had a detective agency find out who and where his mistress was. She's a 26-year-old woman living in the neighborhood of my husband's parents' house. A whole generation younger than my husband. According to the investigation report, she was divorced last year and had returned to her parents' home. She seems to have been working at the business hotel where my husband stayed when he went to the reunion, so that's probably where they met. They were already neighbors, so they knew each other by face, so the conversation probably bloomed. My husband is always at her parents' house. They've known each other since they were children, so it may be easy for him to visit. But I wonder if her parents know that he is still married and are letting him stay. Well, either way, it doesn't matter. I had my husband's luggage loaded onto the truck that soon arrived and sent it off. Now it's our turn. I've cancelled the credit card, let's move too.
Yeah, sounds good.
My son seems overly excited. When I told him we would be living separately from his dad, he said, I fully agree. Just as my husband had long ceased to be a husband in my eyes. He had also long ceased to be a father in my son's eyes. I regretted not making this decision sooner. And by nightfall, we had moved into our new home. Of course, We completely cleared out the house we had been renting, turned off the water, gas, and electricity, and under the supervision of the real estate agent, returned the keys. As my son and I were discussing what to have for dinner, my husband called.
Hey, what's the meaning of this? Why are you sending my stuff? Everyone's in shock.
Well, you seem to be spending a lot of time there. So I thought it would be convenient for you to have your belongings.
Stop messing around. Thanks to you, Kelly's parents found out I'm still married. You included the divorce papers in the package. By the way, how did you know where I was?
I hired a detective agency to find out. The husband truly believed he hadn't been caught having an affair. How naive of him to underestimate me. Your behavior was blatantly obvious. I confirmed the affair, but I didn't want to bother investigating the identity of the woman because I have my own job, and I wanted concrete evidence.
Evidence?
If you want to get as much property division as possible, it's best to have evidence of the affair.
When I get home, you're gonna pay.
Go home. Where to?
To our house, obviously.
Oh, you still want to come home? That's a surprise. As my words implied, the husband seemed to have returned home the next day. He must have been shocked to see our completely empty house. I don't understand why he thought I'd still be there, after I'd sent him the completed divorce papers. And then today, he tried to use my credit card and was embarrassed when it didn't work. I reported the card as lost, so it's only natural that I filed a loss report. Oh, and I also reported a theft to the police while I was at it.
What?
The husband's voice went up an octave. It was obvious he was worried about being arrested. Well, I can't settle down unless he's worried to some extent. I did report it to the police, but unfortunately, because his family. I was told he can't be charged with theft. Furthermore, according to the credit card company, if a family member living with you uses the card, it's considered your responsibility, and you won't be exempted from the payment. I'm the one who has to pay. I'm glad I noticed before it was used. The husband's affair was proven, and the divorce went through smoothly. I reported the divorce to my company. Since my surname will change, it's customary to report the divorce as soon as possible. When I was asked why I was divorcing and casually said, because of my husband's infidelity, it quickly became known throughout the company. My ex-husband has been ostracized by his colleagues and is now seen with contempt. Besides, our company has strict ethical guidelines. So my ex-husband was transferred and is now working in a regional office. I used to pay most of the living expenses, so if he continues to spend money as before, he'll naturally run out. It seems he's finally realizing this. Plus, with the demotion and the resulting decrease in salary, plus child support, and payment for the splurge on his own credit card, he seems to be living a very poor life. He's been late on payments, his card has been suspended, and he's failed all the new card screenings, so he can't get a new one. He even contacted me to lower the child support. But that's none of my business, and I certainly won't do it. Of course, I flatly refused. Then he had the audacity to suggest we get back together because he broke up with his mistress. That's absolutely impossible. Don't ever contact me again, I said, and hung up. The ex-husband's mistress, who knew he was married but didn't tell her parents, and whose previous divorce was caused by her infidelity, was disowned by her parents and kicked out of her parents' house. Whether she got my contact information from my ex-husband or not, she called me directly and asked me to reduce the child support. But it's absolutely impossible for her to say such a thing to me in the first place. Of course, when I refused, she started crying and screaming on the other end of the line. Sigh, Experiencing divorce really makes me realize how difficult it is. But now, I'm living a very enjoyable life every day with my son. My son also seems to be much more carefree and happy than when my ex-husband was at home. If I think he was never there from the start, there won't be any expectations. And that really feels liberating. I plan to keep doing my best in both parenting and work from now on.
My name is Emma. I am 42 years old. I work at a trading company and currently have a fiancé who is very important to me. My late father told me that English would be essential in future, so I studied hard at an English school from a young age, and I became familiar with English by watching foreign dramas at home. I was always excellent in English class throughout middle and high school. When my father passed away during my high school years, I, my mother, and my younger sister Ava, who is 10 years younger, faced a difficult financial situation. I was considering giving up on going to college, but my mother encouraged me. Emma, you're top in English score, so you must work for a major company that can use this as a weapon. I'll somehow take care of the tuition, so you should go to college. With this encouragement, I devoted myself to studying hard and was fortunate enough to pass the challenging exam to a National University of Foreign Studies. Now I am able to work at a major trading company. I always remembered that I must never forget the gratitude I owe my parents. However, since my father passed away, my mother seemed to spoil my younger sister Ava, who is 10 years younger, more than me. While she seemed a bit happy when I got into college, she didn't seem to show much interest when I got a job, and she didn't seem to grasp the concept of my job in the trading industry. Instead, when I graduated from college, my sister was still a 12-year-old elementary school student. My mother would buy her things and praise her every chance she got. My mother found my sister's natural personality irresistibly cute. I didn't get any gifts for my birthday or any other occasions, but my sister always did. I sometimes felt a strange sense of jealousy within me. When I tried to be spoiled by my mother, she would pressure me by saying, "Emma, you're Ava's older sister, so we need you to be more reliable. You must set an example for Ava." I started living alone when I entered college. The gratitude and pressure of being allowed to go to college. As the eldest daughter, I wanted to live as independently as possible from these two words. I wanted to do something that would help my mother and sister's lives. So I worked part-time while in college and started to send money back home once I got a job. Every month I would transfer $300 from my salary into my mother's bank account. And if I got a bonus, I would transfer $500. In my first year, I put in as much as $4,000 a year. I was living very frugally, but there was a sense of accomplishment in being able to put in this much. However, my mother and sister never thanked me at all. Rather, it seemed as if they thought it was only natural for the eldest daughter to put in that much. As I was promoted year by year, I increased the amount of money I was sending home as much as I could. I didn't call or contact my family from my side, and if there was any contact, it was just a little from my mother. I felt a growing distance from my mother and sister day by day. Occasionally, when I went home, I would fly in and out without staying for long. Time passed and my younger sister Ava graduated from high school. Then my mother suddenly called me. "So Ava is going to college and I want you to help a little more." I'm sending money home every month, right? Yes, but I'm not satisfied with just that. You went to a national foreign studies university, but Ava is going to a private women's university. It's going to cost more from now on. I see. How much more should I increase? Let's see. You're currently putting in $500 a month, so I'd like you to put in 3 times that if possible. 3 times? That's $1,500. That's impossible. Are you aware of my salary? No, that's not what I meant. Could you perhaps double it? So you mean $1,000? That's still tough. Then how about around $800? That seems somewhat doable. Thank you for your help. I immediately transferred money to the bank after payday to help my struggling mother in some way. I owe her for letting me go to college. If this helps their lives go smoothly, then it might be a small price to pay. But about $10,000 a year was quite hard for me. I could save only a little, and considering my future, I started working from home as a side job. From being a new grad to now, I have been sending money to my parents for almost 20 years. I don't really want to touch on the total amount. Time passed and I turned 42. I got a call from my mother. I had a bad feeling. So Ava is going to get married. Oh, that's good news. I've been seeing someone for 2 years now too. Well, let's leave your situation aside for now. Ava is 32, isn't she? About the cost of the wedding. My mother cut me off mid-sentence. She's not interested in me. Ava is the priority. So, for the wedding and honeymoon expenses, I was thinking if you could help out financially. Mom, I've been sending money all along, haven't I? Didn't I increase the amount when Ava entered private university? That should have amounted to quite a bit, right? College. I guess there was that too. I can't save much money anymore. I'm 42, you know? Can't you figure something out over there? It's really tough for me. Please, we need a solid amount of money. How much do you need exactly? Maybe $10,000? That's impossible. No, my mistake. $5,000 would be enough. You casually say $5,000, but in addition to the monthly money I'm sending, is that much really needed for a wedding? Is Ava there? Let me talk to Ava. Then my mother yelled at me. You just don't understand. I won't rely on you anymore. There's no need for Ava to pick up the phone. Do you know? Ava has been sending me $2,000 recently. That's what we've been living off of. Show some gratitude to your sister. My mother hung up the phone unilaterally. I didn't understand the meaning of various things she said. It's good to arrange money for a joyous event. But first she said $10,000, then when I hesitated, it dropped to $5,000, and she refused to let Ava pick up the phone. If she's been getting $2,000, shouldn't that be more than enough? And at the end, she said to thank my sister. The whole conversation was so chaotic that I couldn't understand. For 20 years, I've been sending money to my mother, although the amount has varied. It was the same when my sister entered university. At first, she said a generous $1,500 per month, and when I said it was impossible, it immediately dropped to $800. This time, it went from $10,000 to $5,000 in one go. Thinking this was strange, I contacted my fiancé. My fiancé suggested that I might be getting scammed. He proposed a solution for the money issue. 2 months had passed, and I had learned various truths. Learning the truth about my mother and sister, I was shaking with anger. I made 2 resolutions and decided to head home without notice. As I got on the bullet train heading home, and as soon as I arrived at the station near home, my cell phone rang with a call from my mother. I decided to answer the call. "You haven't sent us any money for 3 months now. What's going on?" I thought it might not be necessary anymore, so I stopped. Such selfish actions are problematic. Transfer the amount for the last 3 months immediately. What about Ava? Ava and I have a wedding meeting coming up. The wedding. What's the groom like? Well, the groom, he's the heir to a top-tier trading company. So, isn't that why we're getting a study allowance recently? $2,000 a month. So, her future is secure and my support is even less necessary. I'm kind of busy right now, so I'll hang up. Talk to you later. Wait, Emma! I hung up the phone unilaterally. After that, I ignored several incoming calls from my mother. When I arrived in front of my house, my mother and sister came out dressed casually. I followed them to see where they were going. As I expected, they went into casino in front of the station. About 2 hours later, they both came out of the store. They both looked pale, both sighed together. From behind them, I called out to the 2. "Mom, Ava, did you enjoy the wedding planning?" "Huh? Emma?" Emma?" They were both very surprised to see me show up unexpectedly. "What do you mean, wedding planning? Wait, Ava, what are you talking about? Didn't we choose a lovely venue together?" "Huh? What are you talking about, Mom? I'm not getting married." "Oh, Ava, even though you know choosing the venue is very important, isn't it?" The inconsistencies in their stories were too glaring and full of points to question. Then I continued. "Really? These days, do people plan weddings in such casual tracksuits? I wonder if the person Ava is engaged to is also in tracksuits." "Like I said, I'm not getting married." "Of course not, right? Since there's no fiancé." "Mom was saying that he's the heir to a top-tier trading company." "Wait, Mom, I don't understand." Well, I heard that Ava has been giving Mom $2,000 a month recently. That's amazing. How do you manage to give such a large amount? I couldn't possibly do that. If I had that kind of money, I would spend it on other things. I think so too. It seemed that my mother and sister hadn't coordinated their stories well. This was a trap my mother had set for me one-sidedly. "Ava, did you enjoy planning the wedding?" "No, casino." "Casino is fun, but it's not going well at all. I haven't been winning recently. I lost a lot just now." "That's right, like Mom says, choosing the right place is important, right? For a casino." "Exactly, choosing the right store is important. It's no good during the day. It's best to line up first thing in the morning." As I continue to hear from my sister, the lies of my mother begin to unravel. She seems to be thinking of words to escape the situation, but it's not going well. However, she could only force a smile to go along with the conversation. "By the way, which private university did Ava attend?" "I'm not as smart as you, so I got a job right after high school, but it didn't last long. But Mom told me that because you were going to a private women's university, I needed to send more money, right? There's no way someone with low grades like me could go to such a prestigious women's university." "That's right. I'm glad you're still the same natural Ava. I wonder what's going on, Mom." "What could it be?" My mother had used all the money I had sent to gamble. Naturally, there are wins and losses in gambling. While you might win sometimes, most of it is designed to make you lose. It is said that only about 10% of people can win at casino. It's designed so that 90% of people will lose. My mother and sister, who had become completely addicted to gambling, had lost their calm judgment and were on the verge of their thinking circuits short-circuiting. Mom, here, this is a gift. What's this? An envelope? Is it filled with money? Thank you. What are you talking about? This is a record of your activities for the past 3 months. A record of our activities? My mother and Ava looked closely at the contents of the envelope. It was a collection of photos showing how much the two of them had been engrossed in casino over the past 3 months. The suggestion of my fiancé was to hire a private investigator. They were going almost daily, winning a little and then losing big. It was surprising to learn that they had even started using consumer finance companies recently. Mom, if you and Ava were planning to extort money from me, you should have planned more carefully. By now, Ava has told me a lot, and most of it was obvious, but everything was too sloppy. I was grateful for being sent to a national foreign language university, but I know that it was all covered by the inheritance left by my father. I felt indebted to my mom and dad, so I've been sending money until now. I never thought it was being used in this way. You deceived me well for 20 years. Emma, I'm sorry. I'll quit playing casino, which I can't win anymore. Please forgive me. Me too. You're my only hope, sis. Casino is fun, but I'll quit. How about the two of you work honestly? Then, if we work honestly, will you resume sending money? Huh? I was taken aback by this reply at this point. You will send us money, right? Otherwise, we can't get out of the cycle of debt. If you say you won't send money, I'll go to your house to collect it. That's right, you're our kind sister. You'll definitely help us, right? We're family after all. That's impossible. Sammy, come. I called my fiancé, who was waiting nearby. Hello. Who is this? This is Samuel, or Sammy. We met at work and just got married recently. I'm going to be living overseas from now on. I thought I'd introduce him to you and Ava once, but, well, it turned out like this. I think this should be enough. Sammy is very clear about yes and no, and he said he can't become family with people who are dirty with money. So I came to cut ties with you two at the same time I introduced him. Such a thing. You can't just do that. Sammy, tell them in Japanese. My fiancé, Samuel, with a reassuring smile, said something to my mother and sister. No money, no honey. It's a common phrase. It's the end. My mother and sister listened with their mouths agape. Wait a minute, what is he saying? If you don't understand, look it up in a dictionary. Goodbye. Wait, Emma! Samuel and I caught a taxi and left the scene. It was my final sightseeing tour of my hometown. Samuel was very pleased. After fully enjoying the sightseeing, we took the bullet train back home. My mother and sister, whom I had disowned, tried to sell the house left to them by my father and use the money to pay off their debts, but the value of the local produce was too low to support their lifestyle. They moved into a rundown apartment that they could afford, tried to make a living by working part-time jobs, but their gambling habit did not go away, and they accelerated the cycle of debt. It was now an incurable disease. My husband Samuel was an executive at the trading company where I worked. After finishing his work in Japan, he took me with him back to England, where he was born and raised. I've always admired the idea of living abroad. My conversations with my husband are in English mixed with Japanese. But when I meet people in London, I only speak in English. The English I learned has a different pronunciation than the Queen's English in the UK. It's about as different as Standard Japanese and Kansai dialect. Samuel, my husband, used to point it out to me before we got married, but he says it's much better now. Language is really deep. Without monthly support, I was able to save money. Even now, while working for a company, I trade with Japanese clients through my side job of working from home. My husband and I had a child. Fortunately, my husband hates gambling. The punchline is that easy money earned from gambling disappears quickly. Money earned through hard work is clean money. Everyone would cherish it. My husband and I have similar values about money. We are the type to steadily save without wasting it, like a turtle. In today's world, you never know what can happen. There are times when you need a substantial amount of money. For my happiness, for the family I have now, I intend to cherish clean money even more.
My husband, James, was urgently transported from his business trip. Receiving the contact, I hurried to the hospital. However,
Don't you think I'm definitely better than a failure of a wife like you, Grace, who is unattractive and looking older than her age?
this was when I witnessed an unbelievable sight. My sister-in-law and my husband. They were naked, embracing each other. Along with the surprise, a sense of disgust welled up. Because it's just impossible, right? They are real siblings, aren't they? I could hear my sister-in-law's seductive voice, and I inadvertently covered my ears. When I got the call, I have bursted out with a lot of tears from anxiety. About my beloved husband being gone. What was that all for? I want those tears back. No. That's not it, Grace. No matter what he says, I can't forgive him anymore. They betrayed me. I'll never forgive them. In anger, I turned on my smartphone and called someone. To someone whom they will definitely don't want to meet. My name is Grace. I'm a working housewife, turning 35 this year. I've been married to my husband, James, who is 2 years older, for 5 years. James was a senior at the high school where I used to attend. But at that time, we haven't known each other. I found out that we were from the same high school during our first date. Just before I met James, I had broken up with my longtime boyfriend. Believing I needed a new love to forget the old one, I half-heartedly participated in a blind date. That's where I met James. It seemed that James had also just broken up with his girlfriend, and we developed feelings for each other as we comforted each other. It seemed the same for James, so we have arranged a date another day. During that date, we discovered we were from the same high school. As a result of the growing affinity, we began a serious relationship with the future in mind. After a few years of dating, we got married. I think James is a very good man to spend life with as a marriage partner. He is always willing to help housework and never forgets to enjoy events such as birthdays and Christmas. And because James works for a reputable company, there's virtually no overtime or weekend work. Since we don't have children, he loves me with all his heart. I'm truly glad I was able to marry this man. However, while leading a fulfilling married life, there was one thing that worried me a bit. It was about the relationship with my sister-in-law. My sister-in-law is a married woman who is 3 years older than James, living about 10 minutes away from our home. She seems to have adored James since they were young, and when they were in elementary school, they were together all the time. Her affection for James didn't change in junior high and high school, and even as adults, it continues. To her, James must be her adorable little brother forever. And to her, I am the evil woman who stole her cute brother. When I went to meet his family to announce our marriage, she said that directly to me. I want to have a normal relationship with her, not necessarily a friendly one. But that seems to be an unreachable dream. So, at least from my side, I try to avoid contact with her. However, my sister-in-law doesn't care about that, and calls whenever there's a chance, nagging and making sarcastic remarks.
Hello, Grace. Haven't you quit your job yet? Stop thinking about yourself and become a full-time housewife to support James properly. I've told you so many times.
James can take care of himself, even without me supporting him. He's fine.
Don't talk back to me. Besides, I know better than anyone that James can do everything by himself. Just because you're his wife, don't think you can act superior. You're unpleasant.
With everything going like this, I can only smile bitterly and accompany her in conversation until she is satisfied. I have never reported such behavior of my sister-in-law to James, but I have consulted my mother-in-law, who lives a short distance away. Unlike my antagonistic sister-in-law, my mother-in-law treats me very well. We even arrange to have tea together sometimes. After the consultation, my mother-in-law, astounded at my sister-in-law's selfish attitude, firmly cautioned her. Thanks to that, the sarcastic remarks from my sister-in-law have gotten much better than just after the marriage. In any case, I wish she would accept James and me soon. Then, one day happened. That day, I had to work overtime for the first time in a while. I ended up coming home an hour later than usual, but since James was cooking dinner, I decided to go straight home without stopping by the supermarket. I was tired today and thought of going to bed early. As I passed through the ticket gates at the station nearest to my home, I locked eyes with a man. It was my sister-in-law's husband. I instinctively nodded in greeting, and he responded with a hello and a smile. I only see him for a few hours during the Christmas and New Year holidays. But since we were heading in the same direction, we ended up walking home together. Fortunately, he is sociable, so there were no awkward silences along the way. We chatted about harmless topics as we walked down the dark street. After about 15 minutes of walking together from the station, he raised his hand slightly, said, "Well, I'm going this way. Please be careful on your way home," and left. Even though he told me to be careful, my house was right in front of me. It seemed like he had walked with me because he was worried about me walking alone in the dark. I hadn't interacted with him much before, but I realized he was a good person. I watched him walk away before I entered my house. The next day, I had the day off, so I waved goodbye to James as he left for work, and enjoyed a cup of coffee in the living room. Then, the doorbell rang, indicating a visitor. I put my half-finished cup of coffee on the dining table and peered into the intercom monitor. It was my sister-in-law. I wondered if she had come to make sarcastic remarks. Despite feeling fed up, I headed to the front door. I could have ignored her, but if she found out I was pretending to be out, it would become even more troublesome. If I just let her talk, she would eventually leave. The moment I opened the front door, my sister-in-law grabbed my shoulder and raised her voice.
You're having an affair with my husband, aren't you? You're really the worst kind of woman. You're nothing like the quiet person you appear to be.
I was taken aback, unable to comprehend what she was accusing me of for a moment. As I stood dumbfounded, My sister-in-law became more heated.
Why are you looking so surprised? It's disgusting. I know you met with my husband last night.
It was then that I finally understood what she was talking about. She was talking about how I happened to meet her husband last night and walked home with him. Had she been watching us from somewhere? Or maybe her husband had told her himself. Either way, I haven't cheated on anyone. It was a misunderstanding on her part. When I told her this, she snorted in contempt and spat out. What a shameless woman you are. I'll get you for this, before storming off. Although she didn't seem convinced, I was relieved that she left. I hope this doesn't escalate any further. A few weeks later, James had to go on a business trip. James had been working a lot of overtime and going into the office on his days off recently. It was unusual for him to work overtime or go in on weekends, so when I asked about it, he said he had been preparing for his business trip.
Well, I'm off. Please take care of the house while I'm away. Don't get lonely and cry because I'm not around.
James said in a teasing tone and left. Well, I need to do my best at my own job too. I was just entering a busy period, so I had 2 busy days. And then, on the morning of the 3rd day, after James went on his business trip, while I was preparing for work, my phone rang. The screen of my smartphone displayed an unfamiliar phone number. Who could it be this early in the morning? Hello. May I ask who's calling? In response to my question, the person on the other end of the line said they were from the municipal hospital. That didn't mean anything to me. It seemed to be a hospital located about an hour away from my house. And I haven't been to a hospital recently. Anyway, I had no idea why they were calling. Are you sure you have the right number? I'm sorry, but I haven't been to your hospital before. Then the other person said, "Is this Grace?" and called my name.
Actually, James has been involved in a traffic accident and was just rushed to our hospital. He is currently sleeping due to the shock of the accident. So we're contacting you on his behalf.
Traffic accident, emergency transportation. Hearing these words, I felt a chill run down my spine. Is James all right?
He seems to be out of danger for now, but we think it's best if he stays in the hospital for 2 to 3 days just to be safe. We'll explain more in detail. Could you come to the hospital?
I replied, I'll be there right away, confirmed the detailed address of the hospital, and hung up the phone. I then explained the situation to my workplace. My boss was very concerned and kindly said that I could take paid leave for a while. I changed from my work uniform into my casual clothes and decided to head to the hospital. On my way to the nearest station, I noticed something. The address of the hospital and the business trip destination that James had told me about were in completely different prefectures. Was it my misunderstanding, or had James misspoken? I was bothered by it, but I couldn't figure it out with my confused mind. I aimed for the hospital no matter what. About an hour later, I arrived at the hospital where James had been taken. At the reception desk, I checked the room number where James was and hurried to it. I found the room with James's name on it and was about to open the door quickly. But I thought he might still be sleeping, so I opened it quietly. This room was a double room with beds on both sides. The one on the right seemed to be vacant as there was no patient at the moment. And around the bed on the left, a curtain was drawn, making it impossible to see what was going on. James should be behind that curtain. When I entered the room, I heard a strange noise. It was unclear, but it sounded like a voice. I could also hear a creaking noise. It seemed to be coming from the bed where James was supposed to be sleeping. For some reason, I had a bad feeling and slowly approached the bed. I carefully looked at the bed through a gap in the curtain. There, on the bed, were the figures of a completely naked James. and a likewise completely naked woman. And what's more, on closer inspection, that woman turned out to be my sister-in-law, which was even more of a shock.
Isn't someone like me better than a failure of a wife like you, Grace?
The moment her sweet voice reached my ears, feelings of surprise and disgust welled up within me. I pressed a hand to my mouth, suppressing the urge to vomit, and rolled out of the room and out to the hallway. I found a bench nearby and sat down, taking deep breaths to calm myself. Then I tried to understand the situation on my own. James had left home 3 days ago, saying he was going on a business trip. But that was a lie. He must have been meeting my sister-in-law under the pretense of a business trip. Then, for some reason, James had a traffic accident this morning. When the hospital called me, they didn't mention my sister-in-law. So I can assume that when the accident occurred, James and my sister-in-law were not together. After that, while I was on my way to the hospital, James must have woken up and contacted my sister-in-law. Then he called her to his hospital room and they engaged in an adulterous act. While all of this is pure speculation, it doesn't seem far from the truth given the circumstances. In any case, the fact that James lied about going on a trip, and the two of them are having a guilty relationship, is certain. I don't know when their relationship started, but it's a tremendous act of betrayal. Maybe they were laughing at me for not noticing their affair. With that thought, I was filled with anger. In my impulse, I returned to the hospital room. I quietly entered the room, making sure not to alert James or my sister-in-law, and took all the clothes and underwear scattered on the floor. Now they have nowhere to run. Then I slipped out of the room again and called my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law responded quickly. Mother-in-law, could you come to the address I'm going to tell you? James has been brought in urgently. I didn't tell her that James and my sister-in-law had been committing infidelity. I thought it would be quicker for her to see it with her own eyes than for me to explain. And so, I waited for about 2 hours. My mother-in-law arrived at the hospital, her face pale with panic. Unaware of her own children's infidelity, my mother-in-law worried about James's condition. I felt sorry for her even though it was not my fault. I tried to calm my mother-in-law down as we made our way toward the room where James and my sister-in-law were. I saw a crowd of hospital patients, visitors, and nurses. I wondered what had happened. Holding my mother-in-law's hand, I squeezed through the crowd down the hallway. Then, a familiar voice rang out.
Where did our clothes go? Give them back.
When I looked at the voice, there was my sister-in-law, covering her naked body with bed sheets. James was doing the same.
I have no idea. Why are you two naked? What on earth were you doing here?
The nurse raised her voice against the two.
Huck, what's going on? James was taken away on an emergency, and then…
My mother-in-law, standing a little behind me, murmured in confusion. When they finally noticed our presence, the two of them opened their eyes wide. I have James and your clothes. If you want them back, explain everything. Are you two having an affair? I showed them the clothes and underwear. This seemed to infuriate my sister-in-law, who then approached me, not caring that her sheets were being undone.
How dare you talk back? Yes, that's right. James and I are in love. You're the one who came between us.
As my sister-in-law exclaimed, James nodded deeply behind her.
Moreover, weren't you also having an affair, Grace? I heard from my sister that you were meeting her husband secretly.
James puffed his chest out as if he had one. Looking at him, I felt my love for him completely vanish. He chose to believe my sister-in-law over me. I had no regrets left for him. Just as I was about to counter, my mother-in-law spoke first.
You two, I never thought my children could be so stupid. I'm going to break off our parent-child relationship. Don't ever step foot in my house again. You two can go wherever you want.
An unexpectedly stern and low voice coming from my usually gentle mother-in-law accuses the two of them. Overwhelmed by her fury, or perhaps finally realizing the gravity of their actions, both James and sister-in-law are down, unable to say anything. I toss their clothes and underwear at them. The sight of them picking up the scattered clothing from the floor was truly ridiculous. James, I never cheated. It's just a misunderstanding on my sister-in-law's part. I can't continue as husband and wife any longer. Be prepared for when you're discharged. I'll be claiming a hefty division of property. And of course, I'll tell your husband. With that declaration, James and my sister-in-law, still wrapped in their sheets, slumped in defeat. After a while, I formally divorced James. After the incident, my mother-in-law and I left them behind and returned home first. Apparently, James, who was supposed to be hospitalized, was severely scolded for significantly disrupting the hospital's order, and my sister-in-law was banned from entering. Then, as I declared, I claimed a division of property from James. Furthermore, once my sister-in-law's husband found out the situation, he also sought a divorce and claimed a consolation fee. Left the two of them struggling with enormous payments, working day and night, toiling away. For a while, James and my sister-in-law, who had both become single, lived together. But due to their strained living conditions, they were constantly arguing and soon separated. Perhaps they were intoxicated by the affair situation. And when that was gone, they might have felt there was no point in being together. After that, James sought to reconcile several times. Naturally, I had no intention of reconciling. The third time he asked for a reconciliation, I warned him that I would call the police. If he continued to pester me, and since then, he hasn't shown up. So I don't know what's happening with James now, but the division of property continues to be paid. So I guess he's managing somehow somewhere. And my sister-in-law, who separated from James, seemed to have been barely making ends meet with day labor. But it seemed like she had reached her limit and finally started working at night. Speaking of which, a few years ago, my sister-in-law said things like, "Women who work at night are pitiful." Now that she has become that pitiful woman, I wonder how she feels. I hope she is reflecting on her actions. As for me, I moved to start a new life. I now live in an apartment near my workplace. I still occasionally contact my mother-in-law. Initially, my mother-in-law was very depressed, but lately, she seems to be slowly recovering, which is a relief. I plan to have a tea party at home this Sunday. I felt as if I couldn't recover for a while after being betrayed by someone I trusted. However, I can't afford to dwell on it forever, considering this is the start of my second life. I'll live positively to seize happiness. That's what I vowed in my heart.